Hi, this is Paul. Some of you know that John Vervaeke was on the GrimGriz channel yesterday, and they had a terrific conversation. I'll tell you, when it started, I almost lost my stuff.
Press.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have with me John Vervaeke. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. For the people here, they most likely already know who you are. I am General Griswold Gaius Grim of the First LARP Ingression Protocol.
And when he said that, I just nearly lost it. So John talks about having been all of these different places and seen all of these different things, and I just really wondered if he had ever met a GrimGriz. And John was just fabulous through this. He had fun, which is exactly what he should have, because it is serious play, but it is also play.
And troll of this little corner of the internet. and So it's a real testament to the generosity of spirit you have to even be here with me. Um, I understand you have a respect for serious play.
Yes.
I have a ritual with my channel where, like reminding fish that they're in water, I remind people that there's a lot of mind control out there, even if you just consider advertisement, by
Yeah.
offering them savings throws against mind control using these dice, where they choose between survival, social, wisdom, or heart to base their savings throw on. If it's over 10, they take half damage from the mind control in the rest of the episode. And given you that you're a masterful wizard, they're going to need their savings throws today. Um, so to them I say, choose!
I choose now.
Yes, survival, social, wisdom, or heart.
Wisdom.
Survivalists with a 9, taking full damage. Socialists, prime 17, they're going to be all right. Lovers of wisdom, 18. And heart folks as well, 18. Excellent. This is safe for everybody.
Excellent saving throws on that episode. Whoops, see, I gotta rearrange my buttons to get all my little fancy scenes right. So they talked about mysticism. One of the things that surprises people is because, first of all, people just don't know what to do with Grimm. He scares people. They don't understand the saving throws or the Dungeons and Dragons, and they don't understand the memes, and he's doing all these things. But don't for a minute imagine he is not fully up on this conversation, and so his questions initially are right on point. He picks up on how many how many opponent processes are there, and because that's something that we had talked about in an earlier video, and those of you who've watched some of these things before have seen that. And they talked about narrative that sort of echoed some of the narrative conversation that John and Jonathan had in a video a couple of years ago. And so there was just so much in this that I thought, well, I should probably do a commentary because there's so much I want to talk about. But this morning I noticed that Grimm was doing one of the Just Chatting live streams, and so I jumped onto that. So we had a wonderful conversation, and we touched on a bunch of the things that were in this video. And we were joined by Christian Golden, and we were joined by Tayo from the UK, and eventually Lost Cause came in just at the end. So it was just a wonderful, wonderful time together talking about this video and a bunch of other things. So I clipped some of it. If you want to watch the whole thing, if you want to watch this video with get my buttons right. Yeah, if you want to watch, what's point two? If you want to watch this video with GrimGriz and John Vervaeke, I'll put the link below. And if you want to watch the whole live stream that we did this morning, I'll put the link before that. But I'll give you some of the salient clips that I thought were good. And yeah, the little corner is functioning. It's doing its work. So thanks for watching. Leave a comment.
Oh, son of a... This guy is he's in the studio. What's up, Pastor Paul?
How are you, Grizz?
I'm all right. Well, my body temperature regulation is all a flutter.
Uh-oh.
I'm
Must
fighting.
be that big talk you had.
No, I'm fighting off the flu. I wasn't at my best.
Oh.
I mean,
Well, I watched your talk and it was so much fun. I enjoyed that so much.
it was intense. I mean, there's like so much to talk about with that guy.
Yeah, there is.
You know?
I feel like him right now. I'm on a sofa. There's a picture behind me.
All right.
I can do things with my hands.
So, what'd you make of that beyond narrative space thing?
I don't know what you're referring to.
When I related to him on how in my native timeline he's a philosopher king.
Oh,
Which,
yeah.
by the way, that one, his left forearm up is robotic. It's clear. We think that's why he didn't become a philosopher king in this timeline. Because whatever happened to him to make that happen didn't happen in this one. But he goes into like he thinks that we can have moral aspirations without narrative or beyond narrative.
Oh, yeah. That. Well, that's a continual conversation. Sort of, I mean, and when he and Peugeot had that conversation a while ago, and I'm sort of on Team Peugeot in that, because even though I think I I think our narratives are ways, are they're tools, they're ways we can appropriate things that are enormously. I always say that narratives are compression algorithms. It's how we take a too complex world and we make them manageable. But in many ways, narratives are always reductions. They have to be, because we're small. And Lewis gets into this in Miracles when he talks about the ascension, because here you have Jesus floating up, and Lewis, wrestles with that in the book and says, well, what are we to make of that? Can Jesus fly? And Lewis isn't skeptical about the historicity or physicality of Jesus' resurrection, but he notes that this um, this points to something which is beyond just Jesus getting liftoff. And narratives are always like that. They're in that way, they're iconographic, that they point to things that are beyond, and that's what every true reduction does.
Okay, but they also, because of symbolism, they can point to things that are beyond what exists without compressing anything. Like the whole LARP gate phenomenon. This side narrative that inspires behavior and actions and serious play is, I don't know, it's Chad, I'm not going to put your butt on the screen with Pastor Paul. I'm sorry. It's nice to see you. But
Poor Chad.
um,
Well, it gets into this, and again, Lewis gets into this in Miracles too. It's the question of metaphor. Every time we say this is that, there's a it is and it isn't, or we wouldn't be saying it. And so I think what you're getting at in terms of LARPgate is participation, because participation is think about the Lord's Supper. The Lord's Supper is a participation. Think about baptism. Baptism is a participation. In Romans 6, we in baptism we are united with Christ in his death, and we're united with Christ in his resurrection. That's baptism. So that's symbolic. It's going, baptism is a ceremonial ordeal of drowning. So we go under the water where we can't live, and so we drown and we die. And then we come up out of the water and we breathe again. And so it's symbolic of resurrection. But now it's a part, this is the weird thing about Christian sacraments. So it's a participation, but it isn't the thing itself yet. So when people dress up to go watch a Star Wars movie like Luke Skywalker, it's a participation in Luke Skywalker, but there's not 100 Luke Skywalkers.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean it's not real. I mean, it's in the same way, the same thing as Peugeot's Santa Claus spiel.
But beyond narrative, what do you have for that? What is?
Well, since I'm doing a Santa Claus spiel, let's go all the way here.
Oh dear.
There you go, for your channel, exclusive GrimGriz channel.
Yeah. Ho 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 ho, not ha ha.
Oh, this is going to show up on Friday Morning Nameless or that new Real Vanderclips channel.
We also got we have a gold member.
We got it.
Hey, how's it going? I wish I had a
good.
Santa hat somewhere, but I don't somehow.
So
Got an EMF beanie around here.
So so then you had that interesting. I thought your conversation with John was just great. It was just great. And it was great on so many levels. And I love the Walmart question because that's one of the challenging questions here.
The village question.
The village question. So when you asked about, you compressed it down into it's this full, it's sort of the telos of mysticism and meditation that he talks about. He mentioned it at Thunder Bay. He's arrived at that state, and then you connected it with the woo, okay? Because in many ways, and I really loved his description of when he went into the woo and what is woo. Woo is not the thing itself. I mean, woo in a sense, in Vervaeke's definition, claims when someone is getting into woo, they claim to be the thing itself. And so then you connected that with meditation and his achieving that state.
Right. I mean, if when I hear about this pure consciousness event, and he said, woo is, they claim divine faculty. I'm like, if I have a pure consciousness event and I don't feel like I have divine faculty, what does divine faculty feel like? So I'm glad that we got to go into it.
So I would put that mysticism on a parallel with narrative, because I think they functionally do the same thing. And I think John's relation about woo to that was really important, because he's not claiming that that the unconscious experience is the thing itself, or is he? And so when he, I'll take him at his word, because he's a very careful talker, and he's obviously thought through so much of this stuff, has so much of it articulated, has so much of it defined. It's not the thing itself. And so in that sense, I think it's parallel to narrative, and it's parallel to sacraments, because my baptism isn't the thing itself. It's a participation in the thing itself. It points to the thing itself. And I think that's why when Lewis in The Last Battle, I mean, the great phrase of The Last Battle is further up and further in that in a sense, and this gets into the whole fascination with becoming like God. We never arrive at becoming like God, but we keep traveling towards it. And so, in a sense, I see Vervaeke's mysticism as not necessarily above narrative. I think it's like narrative in that it can be a participation. And that's why, when you ask the Walmart question, he said, no, I'm not going to go to Walmart and talk about Plato and Socrates, and because that's not appropriate. And so then what he does, see, I differ a bit on his definition of parable. He's right in that, and all of the academic work on parable, Vervaeke is right on. It's not allegory in the sense of sort of a simplistic correlation.
More koan than allegory.
What's that?
More koan than allegory.
Yes. Well, some parables have that function. The last will be first and the first will be last. That's not even that's sort of a parable. It's sort of a mini parable.
Well, the prodigal does.
What's that?
The prodigal does, really. I mean, you can chew on that from so many different ways, like riddle of the Sphinx ways.
And if people really want to dive into the parable of the prodigal son, I really recommend Kenneth Bailey, because he's written on it more than anyone I know. He's written a number of books. He's tied it into Jacob in the Old Testament. I mean, he's really tied it through. But and that's, I mean, there's something allegory-like in a parable, but a parable is over allegory in the sense of this sacramental dynamic. And that's what John was pointing to.
Well, if I gotta say, if you want to dive into the prodigal son thing, just start casting your pearls before swine and wait for God to call you home. I mean, that's what I'm trying, right? Save versus Grimbles.
All right.
Survival, social, wisdom, or heart. Choose.
Heart.
Survivalists with a 12. Socialists,
Wisdom.
19.
Oh.
Wisdom, 7.
Ooh.
Don't forget, you get a +3 if you comment on a live stream. And heart, 9.
Oh.
Don't worry, Paul. You get bonus for being on the live stream too. So you're gonna be fine.
Well, I feel like this is one of the reasons that the narrative is so important. That, like, even if you can have some sort of moral framework or something like that is not nested within and like emergent from some sort of narrative, the chances of it withstanding some serious battling seems much weaker. Like, it seems very unlikely that your moral framework will withstand significant opposition if it's not tightly nested in a narrative that is, to you at least, as true gets, right? So,
well, our entire self is narrative, as far as I can tell. Yeah. Like, we're the story we tell ourselves about ourselves, basically. And I think if you haven't ever, especially, give fasting a chance, because there's not, or if you're an addict to any of your addictions, give cold turkey a chance, because nothing will break your self narrative faster than like the beast you're actually riding around in, who will show you who's boss if you don't feed it. And
But that's why we're more than narrative. And that's so you've got a narrative who you are. I've got a narrative who you are. Now there's my narrative of who you are is really incomplete and it's probably distorted. But GrimGriz is bigger than I can reduce to a narrative. And you're bigger than what you can reduce to your narrative. You're because part of your narrative is your parents, the place that you're living in, its history, the history of whatever. I mean, if the history of, let's say, the history of Christianity, because that intersects with your story, and so all of these narratives are, we can point to GrimGriz through these narratives. But Vervaeke is right in that all of the narratives are insufficient. But there is a you beyond the narrative. I think when he talks about what's beyond the narrative, that's how there's always a Venn diagram of agreement. That's the overlap that I can agree with him on.
That's helpful because it encompasses all narratives. I can imagine having a what do they call it? A moral aspiration.
It feels like one of the things that Vervaeke bucks against the most in terms of narrative is an idea of a universal narrative that the individual needs to tap into in order to have a proper moral framework. I don't think it doesn't seem like he's he's aware of the necessity of an individual being sort of
he knows what will happen if there are no moral aspirations. I mean, that's like I don't hear it explicated as well as I would like anywhere that we're in the beast system. And it's like we're gonna have to eat each other. We eat each other's lives via attention or whatever. And an easy way to get rich is to feed off baser natures. And
but then you become what you eat.
Well, the New Testament is full of that stuff, Grizz. I mean, that's in a way part of what the New Testament adds is, in the Old Testament, it's fairly secular. There isn't really a full-blown Satan figure. You've got the figure in Job, of course. You've got the serpent that the New Testament looks back and says, aha. But what you just described is very apocalyptic. The New Testament is very apocalyptic. And that's the New Testament. I mean, Paul, when he talks about powers and principalities, John talking about the Antichrist, the book of Revelation. I mean, the New Testament is dripping with that stuff.
But it's like the beast system in the same way that a seed sprouting through dirt is a beast. Like all of our human society is built on our ability to LARP on top of our beast hardware. And our ability to maintain our self-narrative control over our beast hardware. I don't know, this is probably not the place. I'll have to explicate it in my head before I try and talk about it in public. But as far as the Christianity goes, do you guys feel that like if people are just wondering what can Jesus do for me, or like what church should I go shopping at, is that not way off? Are we not coming into darker times? How do you guys see the Valencia stuff and not see us going into, if not the book of Revelation, at least really dark times for Christianity?
If you if you look back in Christian history, so I just did that video on Servetus. Sam took great exception to it, so I'll just note that.
I got the impression he was a bit of a troll.
And Sam says, no, he wasn't a troll. But Servetus believed that Jesus Christ was coming before. We'll see. And the fact that I'm having this conversation with a few Jews, I'm not going to say the Jews, with a few Jews, shows the tension and difference between the Old and New Testament and the fork that happens with Christianity and Rabbinic Judaism. But Martin Luther believed that the world was about to end. Servetus believed the world was about to end. This is this apocalyptic strain within Christianity validates what you're saying, Grizz. The difficulty is this is very fractal, because the truth is, and I point to the day of the Lord in Joel to our Jewish friends who are listening, because I believe that's where this comes from. The day of the Lord in the Hebrew prophets gets picked up, but the day of the Lord is a repeat recurring thing. Each of us will face the day of the Lord on our deaths. Many of us will face the day of the Lord with a divorce, with a cancer diagnosis, with a firing. Things, right now, things are dark in China for Christians in a way that they're not dark for us. But what you just described in terms of this consumer Christianity, Grizz, you're pointing to the beast. I mean, and you're pointing to, yes, the church is compromised by the beast in its consumerism. And I thought in the Exodus seminar, and Dennis Prager gave great word to that.
Well, that's behind the paywall. We're not allowed to talk about it.
I know. I'm negotiating with Daily Wire as we speak about access and me being able to use it on my channel. So, but you're right, Grizz. You're seeing things right. But the question is, how deep will it go? And how far will it go? How much blood will there be? There's always blood. This is a constant. And so there's sort of a constantness about this, but there's always a narrative and an intensification and a relief. So in that sense, if you understand sort of cyclical ideas of narrative, those are going on. They're going on in our own lives, but also developmental aspects of narrative, those are going on. So you're not wrong, Grizz. You're seeing correctly.
This individualization, the destruction of the family, it's so much easier to control an individual than a family or a community or a neighborhood. And that's why it's gone. And so, how it's so reassuring that any of us see it, that we're coming on together in Estuary groups in person and online to say, hey, you guys, you see this? I see this. We also, okay, well, I'm not, because they're not telling me that when I watch Set. Set's not telling me that the family is being destroyed, that we're easier to control when we're separated, that there's a war on human contact that says stay 6 feet out of hugging distance. So I think it makes me feel that I'm being of service to show other people that they're not alone in seeing it.
I think that points to what Paul's been making videos about the last few weeks, about making sense together and using each other to figure out who's insane and who isn't.
Yeah, because Peugeot and Peterson focus on the relationship between worship and attention. Set just desires worship all the time. And that gets back to your cold turkey comment, Grizz. The digital fast that people are so these, one of the things that I noticed early on is that you've got things going on in the church, and there's stuff outside where people don't go to church. I really liked how you framed it with Chad Grizz about in the church, in a sense, people have a buffer, people have a chance. There was for a time when the seeker movement was really going that, and they still do it. They have these multi-site churches where the pastor is there on the big screen, to all of these different places, and that really hasn't gone in a lot of ways, because now we're obviously talking through screens here too, but we are talking to each other and we are listening to each other, and people they both get too excited about Estuary, or they get dismissive about Estuary, where all Estuary is people getting together for conversation. And again, you wouldn't think you would need such a thing, but under the regime of Set and the Dark Mirrors, the children of Set, we do. And it's important. And that's part of the reason why, generally speaking, it's not a rule, generally speaking, we don't record or put out Estuary meetings. There are some examples out there because we do live in this world of screens, but the telos is in person.
Yeah, but the spy's reporting to me. That's separate from an Estuary thing. That's little finger networking.
Well, one of the problems with Set is that not only does it desire attention, but it quite literally physiologically inspires attention, right? Just by the fact that one of my favorite things that Peugeot said was just an offhanded kind of thing. I don't even know when, maybe a couple of years ago at this point, he was doing a Q&A, and someone asked him about, can you talk about the symbolism of television or something like that? And he mentioned the fact that television emits light, right? That our screens, our phones emit light. And so when we're watching a video of somebody, even somebody as wonderful as Paul Vanderklay, there's something in us that senses a being with a similar image to us, but is emitting light, right? And so there's like
is that not in the Book of Revelation? Like the power would be given unto the image to speak, and those dragonfly and those things that come out of the pit, like those are helicopters. Come on, guys.
And we have these AI golems as well, right? That can speak to us. So I don't know if this is Paul Vanderklay or if this is a deep fake Paul Vanderklay, right? Speaking to me right now, who's been trained by some state-run data set, right?
And that's clearly Santa.
I mean, it was like the craving for conversation was what you noticed. And it's because when the wall of the narrative is what your opponent processing with, you can't, if it's one-sided set worship, you can't opponent process with the narrative. You just have to take what you're told. And so we have to think together somehow. And I'm sure a lot of it's happening, like in video game chats, the people playing Fallout together and stuff. I think one thing that what would be so great about actually going to a church is like you start going to a church so that when you do need to be prayed for, when you have something to be prayed for about, you have a place to just say that. Like, I don't know. It's like the universe seems agentic, and there's a whole lot of debate about the proper way to interface with that agency. But I think as long as you mustard seed while you're doing the interface, you're going to be all right.
Yep.
Well, you know what you said. So Rod, who's on the Marriage Crisis channel, right away when he found me and we started talking, he said, well, you're an internet pastor. And I said, I don't want to be an internet pastor. I've got real questions about internet pastoring because of all of the things that you continue to remind us of, Grizz, that my relationship with someone who is only over a screen is so reduced compared to, let's say, a relationship within a real church community. And so over the internet, I listen to stories, I do randos videos, I pray for people. So I'm doing a lot of internet pastoring, but you're dead on right, Grizz, and that is what the church is for. To know and be known, to love and be loved, to have a place to go where people can pray for you, where they will welcome you in. And this is, again, part of why I'm, you know, I want churches to have estuaries, because it is, I know that it is difficult in many churches for people to, in a sense, come in and bring their real self. And what I mean by that is come in and say the kind of heterodox things that we hear on a lot of our little live streams. And just because they're on a live stream doesn't mean it's not heterodox, but people have to say what's on their mind, or you can't wrestle with them. It's like, you know, so Plato, you know, as John reminds us, is broad, so he's a wrestler. You can't wrestle over a screen. So maybe if it's paintball for Jesus, maybe it should be wrestling with Plato. Because, and in church, in a real space, now, often it doesn't happen. I understand that. But at least there's a chance to actually have a relationship with grit. And that's part of why churches are local. They're relational. They're face-to-face. They're in real life.
I've heard good things. There's a Methodist one literally a block away, and a Baptist one a block and a half away. And I've thought about going there just because I'm supposed to be selling this house, and like, you know, maybe there'd be somebody I could meet there that would help with that. But it's like, with my what I actually think about reality, there's like, my issues with the Old Testament make me like have to like play along with a lot of stuff I don't to participate with them, and it feels dishonest. And I think a lot of what keeps people out of church is the hesitation that of being there honestly. Like, to seriously pray, even. I mean, it's one thing to say, "Oh, Jesus," but like to pray with knowing, or pray with the intention and belief, I guess, that what you're praying is gonna be heard. Like, to put yourself in that state isn't necessarily a comfortable one for people.
There's just like the question that you have, Grizz, about the apocalyptic. There's all of this stuff around what you just said. Every Sunday, people come to Living Stones, and if you watch the live stream, you'll hear the prayer request. And on one hand, you could say, well, wait a minute, all of these Christians could pray at home, and they are. All of these Christians could bring these things to God as they are, and they are. But there's something about coming to church in the assembly of the people, in this room that you have had all of the ministry of the word, the sacraments, the communion of the saints, where you have had all of this. Then you bring your prayer. And there's something about that teaches us, okay, and this is a tension between the Protestants and the Catholic and the Orthodox, but Protestants go for this just like everyone else does. Okay, this is the place of God, and these are the people of God, and here is my need. And I've said this to God again and again and again, and I haven't got what I've answered. So now I'm coming to church and I'm going to do it. And it's sort of like the woman who has had the issue of blood, and she makes her way through the crowd and she grabs after Jesus' garment. And Jesus said, "Who touched me?" And the disciples are like, "We're like this, Jesus. Everyone's touching you." No. And the fact that, this whole question you had earlier, Grizz, about when did Jesus know that he was, people love to think about that because it's just a mind-blowing question about the incarnation. But Jesus asked the question, "Who touched me?" as if he didn't know, and maybe he didn't know, and maybe we don't know. We don't even know what we think in our noodle. But that's, in a sense, what the church is for, where, yeah, it might be a messed up church, and the pastor might have all kinds of problems, and the music might be terrible, and the people might be sketchy. But to me, those are, you'll find God will be there under all the mess, and you can grab the hem of the garment.
Chad had a terrifying notion. Perhaps you're in a constant state of prayer, whether you like it or not. That definitely puts a different light on porn addiction, doesn't it?
It's your same point. It's the same point.
It's a graven image.
I'm sorry I didn't see you down there in the thing. I've never had so many people in my StreamYard before. I don't last long, fellas. And unlike Jacob, I don't let people just run off on the channel. So I'm just going to thank you all for being part of it. Teo, goodbye. And everybody else, goodbye, good night. And thanks for being here, virtually not alone, with all of us on the GrimGriz live stream. Good night, everybody.